Hey guys, Ian here, and welcome to today's video in which I'm going to be attempting to channel my inner Mark Crilley. Yes, I'm going to be attempting the Realism challenge not once, not twice, but 3 times. Why 3 times? Because I'm a glutton for punishment, that's why. So I don't have Mark's book, The Realism Challenge. I've never read it. I have seen a few other people do the challenge though, so I think I've got the gist of what it is and how I'm going to go about doing it. Essentially, I'm going to take a common everyday household object and try and create as realistic an illustration of that thing from a top-down perspective as I can. Now, I don't think there's any restrictions on how you do it or what medias you use in order to do it. So I'm going to be using a mixture of all sorts of things. I have watercolor paints, I have graphite pencils, I have water-soluble pencils, I have Copic markers, I have Faber-Castell markers, I have so many different things that I could potentially use. Hopefully, I have enough things to be able to do something. Now, the first object I'm going to be attempting is a walnut. I think it's probably simple enough that I should be able to do a reasonable job with it. Like I say, this is the first time I've ever done this, so I'm hoping that this will be okay. And yeah, let's just jump straight in and see how we get on. I started by roughing out a very quick sketch of the walnut with some of the larger areas of detail, and then I went straight into the colour, and I think that was pretty much my main mistake with this one. What I should have done is spent a bit longer on the sketch and tried to get as many of the little details and the little variations in the surface of the walnut into the sketch before I'd started the colour. The trouble that I found was because I was working with colour and the values and the shading, looking back and forwards between the actual walnut and the illustration became quite visually confusing. It was more difficult to see exactly where I was supposed to be painting the different values, whereas if I'd had the details already sketched, it would have been much simpler to try and get those different values and colours and shading in. So I knew when I moved on to my second challenge, not only was I going to try something which was going to be less visually confusing, but also I was going to try and get as many of the details into the sketch as I possibly could. That being said, I am really happy with the result. I think I ended up with an illustration which definitely looks like a real walnut. It was very difficult to colour match exactly to the walnut that I was using, but what I ended up with I think is a pretty good version of it. Okay, well, I mean, it didn't go too badly. It's definitely a walnut. I don't know if it's this walnut, but it's a pretty good, I think it's a pretty good illustration of it. I think this one was probably a little bit too complicated to start off with my as my first realism challenge. So I'm going to move on to something a little less complicated, and I'm going to be attempting realism challenge of a little washer instead. I think this one should be quite fun actually, because it's got lots of different colours and textures in it, so we'll see how I get on with that. The washer is obviously a lot smaller and a lot simpler than the walnut, so I wasn't too worried about getting the shape and things correct. It was more about getting the details and the colour matching as best as I possibly could with this one. Having learnt what I had from the walnut, I spent a lot longer trying to get all the little details and all the different variations and changes in the surface of the washer into the sketch as I possibly could before I moved on to the colour. And this definitely helped me when it came to making this a much better representation of the washer I was actually drawing as opposed to just a washer. Because it was also a metallic surface, it meant that I had to use some other mediums as well as the watercolor paints and pencils. Now I know Mark recommends using white gouache for this, but I actually don't have any, so I ended up using white gesso instead, which is actually used for priming canvases. And it worked surprisingly well at bringing out the highlights in the metal, which otherwise I wouldn't have been able to, because obviously you can't make an area of an illustration any brighter than the paper that it is on unless you're using, say, a mid-tone paper. So having put into practice those techniques that I'd figured out after doing the walnut and the washer, I was much happier, much more confident moving forward into something a lot more complicated that I don't think I would have been able to do successfully had I not done these two first. I think that went a lot better. That's a pretty good representation, I think. I'm quite happy with the way that came out. It's definitely boosted my confidence a little bit. So the next one I'm going to do, now that's going to be a complicated one. Now I'm 90% certain that the next one I'm going to fail, because the next thing I'm going to be attempting is this. It's metallic, it's shiny, there's lots of complicated little mechanical parts and geometric shapes that I'm almost certainly going to get wrong. So let's see how I get on with yeah, let's just do this. So in tackling my trusty pair of pliers here, I knew that it was going to be a bit of a challenge. It's got lots of different shapes, lots of different textures, lots of different metallic surfaces, including red metallic, which I wasn't entirely certain how I was going to go about tackling. Made more difficult by the fact I realized I didn't really have the right colors in order to mix an effective version of the red that the pliers are. Coupled with the fact that it's a metallic red as well and had to be shiny and semi-reflective, made this one much more challenging. And it wasn't until I was much further into this illustration that I started feeling like maybe it was going in a direction that I was happy with. For a long time I really felt that I was doing a really bad job. But when I started applying some of the deeper reds to it, it really started to come alive on the paper. Unfortunately, I messed up one of the shadows. It kind of got a bit smudged. I think that takes away the effectiveness of the overall thing. But I am really happy with the way that this ended up coming out. I didn't use my water-soluble pencils anywhere near as much as I had done with the walnut. In fact, I think I only used a black one for some of the very deeper shadows. I did use a graphite pencil to help further define some of the areas of the blades, and again I used my white gesso in order to bring out those highlights on the very shiniest parts of the blade, and also some of the scratches and blemishes in the red paint on the handle. Overall, I'm really happy with the result. I don't think I could have managed it quite as good a job if I had not done the first two challenges first. This has definitely been a learning experience and something I'm looking forward to trying again in the future, possibly with some other mediums as well. I think I stuck very rigidly to using watercolor paints, whereas maybe if I had expanded out into some other mediums as well, I could have got some better effects, especially around the shadows. The shadows were the things that I feel I failed most on, but the actual objects themselves I'm pretty happy with. Especially considering this is the first time I've ever attempted anything like this, and the first time I've picked up any of my watercolors in probably the last 10 years. So with that in mind, I am really happy with what I've managed to achieve. Do you know what? I think that went better than I could have hoped. It's not bad, considering I didn't have the right colours for it. It's not too bad. I think I did a fairly good job. But what I think isn't important. What really matters here is what you think. Do you think that I managed to successfully channel my inner Mark Crilley? Have I successfully completed the Realism challenge, or have I failed abysmally? Let me know in the comments down below. I really hope that you have enjoyed this video. It's been so much fun to do. It's been a while since I've had a chance to get out my watercolor paints, and I really look forward to hopefully getting them out and doing something with them again in the future. I'm now kind of looking for an excuse to use them again, but for now I'm just happy to have had an excuse to do these 3 pictures. So guys, if you have enjoyed the video, please do leave me a like. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and of course take care, and I will see you next time.